Hey everyone, welcome to our Web3PMs event. We're so lucky today to be chatting with Paul, who's head of product at Foundation. Just for those of you who are new here, Web3PMs is a community that's helping people transition to and thrive in their product roles. And we're super excited for some of the events that we've had and some of the upcoming programming that we have planned. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to Paul. Paul is the head of product at Foundation and has an incredible story kind of background as a software engineer leader, CTO, startup founder, before he transitioned to this product role. So Paul, why don't you just quickly introduce yourself and then we'll just dive in.
Yeah, sure. Start with a little bit of my background. So, hey everyone, my name is Paul. Let's see. In undergrad, I studied electrical engineering. From there, I thought I was going to go into academia, was in a PhD program in systems biology. And around the same time, I reignited my interest in music and also kind of caught the startup bug. So that brought me out to San Francisco. Spent time at a few Web2 startups there. I was the first hire in CTO at a YC-backed IoT startup. And so I spent a few years growing the product and growing the team there. And then starting in 2017 is kind of when I made the pivot into crypto. I was thinking about what's next for me, and I found it both crypto to be both intellectually stimulating and also like a force of good for the world, I believe. And so ever since 2017, I've been doing some crypto contracting and consulting. So I did some smart contract auditing with a team of auditors for some Web3 projects like Open Zeppelin and Decentraland and a stablecoin project. I did some open source grants that I got from the Ethereum Foundation and Gnosis. I spent some time doing Web3 dev work for a few different companies, including a stint at Dharma, which is a DeFi company. And some of the founders from Foundation came from Dharma. So that's how I was originally connected with them back when Foundation was first spinning up. And then that brings me to my Foundation days, which started about 2 years ago. And I could tell the team was really great at what they do. And I was more interested in like fun consumer experiences than I was in DeFi, although DeFi is super cool too. And, like harkening back to my music days, I really was excited by something that could help creators make a living on the internet. And that's a big part of the foundation or the mission for Foundation. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Awesome, cool. Well, we'll dive into that. But before we get into Foundation, 2017 was in the earlier wave, I think, of people that were transitioning to crypto. How did you discover that field? And like, how did you like kind of what motivated you to dive in and decide that this is where you wanted to spend your time?
Yeah. So at the time, I had decided I didn't want to do another Internet of Things startup. I wanted something that kind of wasn't bound by the physical world. And so I was thinking like, what's next for me in startups and tech? And I was thinking like, oh, machine learning could be interesting. There's a lot of like interesting tech going on there. But what drew me to crypto was its ability to empower individuals. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly when I stumbled upon it, but being in the tech world, you definitely hear people having talked about Bitcoin here or there before. But Ethereum was really the part that hooked me. I think 2017 was like the crypto kitties days. So I think I probably was aware of that at the time, although it took a little while for me to circle back to NFTs. But I think it might have been crypto kitties and just like general interest in crypto in that time that kind of
Yeah.
hooked me.
Yeah. And just like that kind of the idea of like ownership and power to the user, to the end user and the individual. Cool.
Yep.
So let's
And oh, sorry, last thing. From a product perspective, also, like I like the value prop to the users that they would have the right to exit. So if you don't like a certain front end for like a decentralized back end, you're fully free to like take that data with you and move to a different experience that works better for you. And I thought, that was just like a new unlock with this technology that I could get really excited about. And also like thinking as a former startup founder, the fact that computers can kind of like make promises for the first time. So you don't have as much platform risk if you're building on top of someone else's work because smart contracts can be immutable, which means like there's an API there that you can build on, but there's no risk it'll just be suddenly turned off or the rules will change.
or like the fees will change over time. Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that exit you talked about for users is also true for creators. If you've built a following on Twitter and you leave, you lose your following. And so I think that yeah, that exit's like really kind of a huge part of crypto. So let's start with Foundation. For people who are not familiar, just at a high level, it's one of the leading NFT marketplaces, but curious to get your take of what is Foundation as it exists now and what's the vision for it?
Yeah, so I can start at the high level. We're the premier on-chain marketplace for NFTs on Ethereum, and we have an emphasis on both creator experience and collector experience in equal measure. And what we're trying to do is create a foundation for Web3 as a whole, which we believe to be the next generation of the internet. So quite a broad and ambitious vision.
Yeah, super hefty vision. And I know that you had early success in some kind of like big projects like Edward Snowden's first launch and the Nyan Cat, but now as the NFT market is getting really competitive and there's a lot of players that are there and kind of a lot of projects, how do you think about differentiation and what makes Foundation really stand out?
Yeah, it's hard to answer in one sentence, but I think there are a couple factors. I think more so than anyone out there, we value a simple experience. We really value visual design. We're very community forward and community centric. I think we like to build things kind of end to end or vertically integrated, if you want to call it that, like kind of like an Apple maybe. So when we're thinking of new features, we think about how it would work all the way from eng to marketing. And so we try to ship kind of a cohesive whole. And I think that differentiates us. And then finally, I would say we lean into what I would call strong tech. So I'm borrowing that from a blog post by Chris Dixon, who's one of our investors. But to explain what I mean by strong tech, maybe with a metaphor, if you think of when the iPhone first launched, they made the choice to have a software keyboard, which if you think at the time, it was mostly Blackberries, and that was a controversial choice at the time. And the like pull quote was "your thumbs will learn." And fast forward to today, that's definitely proven to be true. So I think what differentiates us is making choices like that, where we're embracing from first principles what's new about this technology and starting from there, rather than trying to kind of like bolt on some abstractions from Web 2.
Yeah, that first principles approach. So I know the strong tech article kind of talks about the pairing that happens. You have like a pair of technology that comes in a strong form and a weak form. Is there kind of a weak form to what your kind of like the complementary form that might have that like initial mainstream kind of adoption, but isn't kind of what the tech enthusiasts are excited about?
Yeah, I think two smells that it could be a little more Web 2 than Web 3 would be an over reliance on a database. I think databases are one of the key like primitives of Web 2 companies, but part of the whole unlock with Web 3 is that there's like an open API, and that's only true if a lot of the data that powers the experience is on a blockchain rather than in a database. And then let's see. Oh, I had a second one, but it's escaping me. It'll probably come back, but
Yeah,
I think
whenever it
that's
comes back. No, but I think that's a key thing that a lot of people don't know is that some of the leading NFT marketplaces are not on chain. And so they're kind of just an API that's accessing a database and they're kind of surfacing what's on there, but the kind of the NFT isn't held natively on that chain. And so I think that's an important distinction. Another one.
I thought of the other example. Custodial wallets versus non-custodial wallets. In our early days, pre-product market fit, we were leaning heavily into the direction of abstraction. And so we were helping users create their wallets for them and custodying that on their behalf. And then we made the choice, which I think was a strong tech choice, to let users bring their own wallets, which again, at the time was a little bit controversial, but it really is like the foundation for this being something that really empowers users rather than us having like too much power to control the destiny of our users.
Awesome. So on that same point of differentiation, another thing I think that stands out to a lot of people is that Foundation's invite only on the creator side. So a creator has to have sold something and then they're able to kind of invite someone. And so that kind of cultivates a strong community and really focuses on like building those connections to get that invite. I'm curious, like kind of the product thinking behind that. And yeah, and just like, you know, obviously the trade-off with that is you can't have as expansive of a collection. So like kind of talk about the trade-off in that decision.
Yeah, so I think the challenge was to ensure for collectors that there are great NFTs on our platform that they can collect. But that definitely was kind of a a wedge or a growth hack in a sense. It made a lot of sense in the early days. On some time scale, we'll definitely explore removing that restriction. But I think it helped with setting the tone for our early community. And what we didn't want to do definitely is have our team exclusively deciding who can enter the platform. And so I think the invite system was kind of like an interesting unlock to let the community decide for us who the next set of people who should be creating on our platform is.
That's awesome. Okay, so a lot of the promise, so you talked about like the vision is to build this new creative economy, and a lot of the promise for that comes from ownership, which we talked about, and I think NFT in a way solve that. Also kind of help with the monetization with like commissions from secondary sales. But one big piece that still doesn't really seem solved yet is kind of the promise of creating community and stronger connections with supporters. And so curious like what the current solution looks like and what kind of the hope is to solve that.
Yeah, great question. To be frank, that's not the part where I've done the deepest thinking yet. That's definitely somewhere where we need to go. I think there are two pieces to that. Tapping into existing audiences that you may already have prior to NFTs and Web3 and growing new audiences. And so, we've made some choices on Foundation, like letting people prove that they control a certain Twitter or Instagram profile. And I think that's a strong signal to people that like how they can think about who this person is on some of these platforms they're familiar with versus on Foundation. But I really think, growing new communities is maybe the more interesting part. And I think discovery is a key piece of that. That's something we have some ideas how we could do a better job of, but parts of the app that we have right now that help people with like discovering new artists and joining their communities are like the feed feature we have, where you can follow people and see their on-chain activity. We have a browse experience where you can look through different NFTs and follow people that you like. And then our homepage definitely serves as a place where people can find interesting creators right now. I think there's definitely a future for all kinds of social features that can power Web3. And we're always trying to find the balance of what we want to build as part of like the Foundation ecosystem and what we can tap that's already out there in Web3 that can kind of be a complementary enhancement that works together with Foundation. So some interesting open questions there.
Yeah, it's exciting for sure. I think right now, when people say community in Web3, it's either like DAOs or Discord, and there's no real solution around that. And so it's interesting either like taking an approach, you build stuff in as part of your product, or you can help enable like kind of new types of interactions, but it's definitely a big question.
I think, sorry, I keep thinking of final examples. Our collections product is maybe a good example of that too. So we gave people the ability to have a whole body of work that's like a series of NFTs that all work together. And I think we've seen that unlock a kind of social community building behavior where the people who collect from the same NFT artist, it's kind of like an on-chain way of representing that community.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So how do you stay on top of what the community or your creators, your collectors want, like kind of the trends, and I guess part A is like, how do you stay on top of it? And then B is like, what are you hearing from them? What are the kind of the main pain points that you're looking to solve for?
Yeah, so Twitter is a big part of it. I feel like we're kind of constantly doing 24/7 user research passively just by being on Twitter. We're lucky to have a really engaged and vocal user base, which is awesome. So I love seeing people have all kinds of product ideas on Twitter that we absorb. We'll definitely talk directly with creators and collectors, either myself or others on our team. And then, I think desire paths are an interesting thing. So even if you're not directly talking, kind of watching patterns for how people use your product can reveal things that aren't there yet that they might want. So those three things are kind of the main three ways that we engage with our users and hear from them. And then let's see. Sorry, what was part two of that question?
What are the things that you're hearing from them, like on
Yes.
Twitter from Desire Pass? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we just had this big marketplace launch where we let people have new ways to buy an NFT instantly at a given price and make offers on any piece. That was definitely something we were hearing loud and clear from our community before we launched it. I think collectors are always hungry for more and more ways to slice and dice data and find interesting NFTs that are out there. So I think discovery of some type will be definitely an upcoming priority that we're hearing from our community. I think people want more expressive ways to represent their work, either that they've created or collected on their profiles. And so we're thinking what the future of like the profile experience looks like on Foundation. Yeah, there's an endless list I could give you.
I'm sure.
People have lots of thoughts, which is amazing.
No, that's helpful to get a taste of that. And like one thing I think Foundation was the first to introduce, I think, was 3D NFTs. Like either for that or any example, like what can you kind of talk through, like what did you see in the market, like for kind of a put the product hat on for the PMs out here, and like, you know, how did you prioritize that? How did you decide, like, were there use cases you were seeing that you wanted to adopt, or did you decide to, like, you know, a new primitive can open new use cases? Like, kind of talk us through a decision like that.
Yeah, so I think 3D is an example of something that's like very brand aligned and mission aligned. I do think that one was an experiment. It's not like we had overwhelming data that there would be like instant and widespread demand for that. But I think it was just kind of, we definitely hear a lot of feedback about wanting more file types, and that's kind of like a natural next file type. I also think our company was early in doing some writing about the metaverse, which is now a very common topic to talk about on the internet. And I think 3D objects just will kind of fit very naturally in that future.
Yeah.
So speaking of desire paths, we would see a lot of people who were making like MP4 videos, essentially making 3D art, but then the video was like rotating and showing that art. So that's a good example of a desire path that showed us that people would have demand for this. And then definitely talking to creators as well. So people were just kind of dabbling with new bits of software. Blender was a bit of software that we hear over and over again that people are experimenting with. And yeah, that's the direction we want to go, is kind of enabling people to, you know, create or collect kind of any kind of creativity on the internet. So generalizing from images and videos to new file types was like always part of the roadmap. Yeah, so a combination of all those factors. It's hard to give just a single answer.
That's exciting. And I think a lot of the innovation is happening on the project level, and then a lot of it is happening more at like kind of the marketplace platform level. And so it's interesting to see what like kind of the sources of that. And it'll be cool to see like what are the types of use cases that can be enabled because Foundation enabled 3D. So you talked a little bit about utility, and I know you have a background in music. Like, what are some examples of utility or some verticals, you know, music, metaverse, or whatnot, that you're super excited about that you think will kind of take hold in the next 2 or 3 years, and some that might take hold longer term, 5+ years out?
Yeah, interesting question. I'm not sure I immediately see the connection between utility and music, so maybe I can get that in a
Or
moment.
like,
But
I know music NFTs is like one kind of vertical where, like, you know, songwriters can own their music, and then creators can kind of benefit from sales of that song, royalties of the song, something like that.
Yes, got it. Yeah, I think my high level reaction is that I haven't yet found like the killer app of utility that I think may exist out there. I'm always throwing out Apple metaphors, but I think like in the early days of the App Store, it wasn't super clear what would be like the killer app. And then, you know, in retrospect, Uber and Instagram and apps like that were things that were really unlocked by this new mobile technology where you have like a camera and a GPS on a device in your pocket. But I don't, you know, if anyone could have predicted that ahead of time, they'd be very rich. So it's definitely a hard thing to do, and it's hard to say exactly where utility is going. But NFTs are programmable, so like the possibilities are endless, and it's hard to predict where that will go. I think, but yeah, to answer your question more directly, I guess part of the cool thing about NFTs and this tech being like an open state machine that anyone can build on, it also means that it's not necessarily always on the creator to define what utility would mean for a given NFT project ahead of time. It's something like there can be like derivative projects building on top of that post hoc that like imbue it with utility. And I think things like that are pretty cool.
Yeah, like the composability. I guess CryptoKitties was like one example. There's a lot of like things built on top of that. That was exciting. Okay, cool. So before we dive into more just product and you know, product in Web3, just last question on just DAOs and NFTs. Like a lot of people said 2021 was the year of NFTs. 2022 is the year of DAOs. I don't really believe that. I think that we're early days for both of those areas, but just kind of curious how you see potential like interactions between kind of two of these really hot topics.
Yeah, great question. Again, on that desire path topic, we've definitely had interest from DAOs and collecting on our platform. Pleaser DAO was like heavily plugged in with Foundation and did some of their early collecting here. Um, it's also a good example where we have to make that kind of what do we build as part of Foundation versus what should be composable question. I think there's an interesting future where um, things like a Gnosis Safe could plug in with Foundation in a pretty natural way. And then we're also keeping an eye on like lots of people have different definitions of what a DAO is. There are these like DAO building frameworks. There are the Moloch DAOs, all kinds of DAOs. So what we're trying to balance is that not building like everything in the kitchen sink, but finding like the really repeatable things that people are looking for and making sure we can build that into the product. But I think it's definitely the case that some NFTs can be prohibitively expensive for people to collect. And so grouping together to form like a group of people to collect is one of many possible ways to address that problem. So I think it's definitely something we want to see more of. And don't want to be like too skeuomorphic, but like there are some things from the like Web2 previous art world that like we can draw inspiration from. So there are definitely things like music labels and galleries out there that are organizations and not individuals, at least not always. Um, and I think there will be like structures like that that are kind of emergent on Web3 too. They won't look exactly the same, but I think DAOs will be a piece of unlocking structures like that.
Awesome. Super exciting. Okay, so actually, before we go into kind of how you became head of product, I know you said early in your career you were looking at DeFi and NFTs. A lot of people in our community are looking to make the transition into Web3 and are kind of evaluating a lot of different areas and are thinking about how they prioritize companies to reach out to. Any advice for kind of for people in that stage as they kind of there's a lot of stuff happening in Web3, like to prioritize those areas?
Yeah, it's definitely a personal question. It's hard to give generalized advice. For myself, I kind of just went with my gut, and I knew that I was more interested in like a kind of more standard consumer type of use case, and I think NFTs skew in that direction. But if you're really interested in like finance, I think DeFi is like a great bet. I would say that they're both opportunities on the same order of magnitude. And like Web3 as a whole is so nascent and so early that I don't think choosing one or the other, or even choosing DAOs, is going to make or break your career. I think on a long enough time horizon, they're all going to blow up in a really big way. At least I think so. So yeah, it's mostly a matter of personal preference. I do think make sure you're active on Twitter. It's nice to have a pulse of what people are doing, and the Web3 community is definitely very active there. But really, personal preference and like the team and the company fundamentals, I feel are more important factors than like exactly what they're working on, as long as it's a mission you can get really excited about and it's something that you can feel great about like creating for the world and iterating on. So yeah, it really is a personal choice, I suppose.
Awesome. So I know that so one, just want to shout out that Foundation is hiring. And so we'll talk a little bit more about Foundation right now, and you can talk about what you're looking for. But you made the transition from kind of an engineering role to head of product. Curious, after so many years as an engineer, like why you decided to transition to product, and then also advice for the other software engineers in the audience that are looking to make that transition too.
Yeah, I think in retrospect, I was always a product person who was like masquerading as an engineer for a while. And I think it was a natural place to start from my background that was like doing a lot of computer science related work in undergrad and grad school. And then the earlier stage, the startup, the more people are wearing multiple different hats. So I think I was always wearing a product hat because I was always doing early stage Web2 startups as well. So it's been a smooth transition for me, almost like, very natural, and hasn't been like too jarring in any ways. I think I'm spending more time thinking a lot about clear, concise communication. I think it's impossible to overemphasize how much you want to like rally like mimetic ideas that help people understand the simplest form of where you're driving to. And that's something I've had to, keep working on. But all in all, it's a pretty natural switch.
Awesome. And I think, like the takeaway I have for that is for people who are having difficulty getting kind of breaking into products, like going somewhere small where you can wear multiple hats
Yes.
and like kind of show your product intuition, show your like eagerness and interest and, background in product thinking can help, clearly one success story right here. So
Yeah.
awesome. Okay.
Big plus one.
So what does the head of product role entail? I know that like people looking at smaller companies are maybe looking at like head of product versus comparing it to like an IC or senior IC role. Like, what is the head of product role? What are some of the pros and cons to that role?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's a nice segue from the last question in that if I were making a choice, I wouldn't necessarily over rotate on exactly what the name of the role is, just because I think Web3 as a whole is so early that you really want to find like a rocket ship company that has a great product you're excited about. And I think if Web3 grows as I think it will, your initial title or role, whether it's engineering versus product or like a product manager versus head of product, I
Mhm.
don't think it's too important. You just like join a great team and do a great job. But can definitely talk to some of the trade-offs. I think for me, it's like being head of product is mostly about having that 10,000 foot view. So it's really a question of zoom level. What I miss out on is being as involved into like day-to-day work of like exactly how we're going to build what we're building, and sometimes even aspects of the why for what we're building. I try to be quite plugged into that, but I'll never have like the same zoom level as any given PM. Um, and I think, what it ends up meaning for my day to day is I focus a lot on like hiring and plugging in with other like teammates on our strategy and being there to provide like context and edit and kind of like help to set a quality bar for the products we're trying to ship. Um, and really just like set up PMs with the ideal work environment where they can grow their careers. And where we're going at Foundation, everyone owns like their own product line. So yeah, just being abstracted enough to set people up for high level goals, but then figuring out how we're going to approach those different parts of the product
Awesome.
lines.
And is there anyone that you think, um, not like any kind of specific skill sets that you think you have to overcome to be successful at that role, or people that you think might not be like best suited for that role?
Yeah, I think it has to be someone who's intensely curious. They always have to be asking why, a few layers deep. Requires a lot of empathy. Um, I think in it with that role in Web3, you have to be able to like make some pretty bold, calculated bets about the future because everything's kind of playing out in real time. There aren't that many best practices yet. Um, Execution is definitely like a big part of product in general, and so like that's definitely a very important part. I think yeah, it definitely requires generalism, like being a generalist to some extent, and strong communication skills. I think that's a really important part, being able to speak to different audiences. Um, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So talk a little about Foundation, what the culture is like, kind of like the size of the company, what the culture is like, what you look for in people that you're hiring.
Yeah, so the size of the company is 25-ish people right now. We are hiring, so I think we'll get to 50 pretty quickly.
Mhm.
The culture of the company, like being creator first, is very like a big part of where we started and what our culture will always be based on. A lot of our teammates either create NFTs or collect NFTs, so we're all very plugged into this like movement and to creativity on the internet generally. It's a team that is they're great people and they care a lot about doing what they do very well. So that like that talent density is a really inspiring environment to work in. And that's across functions, whether it's in marketing or design or engineering or product or ops. Everyone's just kind of firing on all cylinders. And we are a remote first company, like we were talking about at the very beginning of this. So we have teammates all around the world. That's at this point a big part of our culture, I would say. And we have yeah, so some things that might have happened in like at a water cooler back in the day is like we'll have like some fun Slack channels.
Mhm.
But yeah, mostly about things like art, music. Yeah.
Awesome. And are there specific like roles that you're hiring for and like yeah, gaps that you're looking to fill?
Yeah, so our product org is one of the newer orgs in the company. So gaps abound. We have lots of like interesting product areas that we want people to come in and own. The way we're thinking about pillars is like putting people on creator tools versus market tools versus discovery, but also it can go lots of places from there. We're thinking about what it would look like to have a developer ecosystem, what it might look like to have curation as a product line, and yada, yada, yada. Lots of options there. I think to thrive right now, we definitely are looking for people who are adaptable because we're still early enough that we're kind of orienting around projects rather than product pillars. Although where we're going on like a 6-month timescale is having more static pillars of the company where people can, on a longer timescale, keep iterating towards the same goal.
Yeah, I love when I talk to people in Web3, like 6 months is kind of the longest that they're willing to project out, because beyond that, no one really knows what's going to happen. So
I mean, if we go back 12 months, nobody knew about Foundation, and now we're where we're at today. So a lot happened in like 4 quarters.
Yeah, because you guys started beginning of last year, right?
Yeah, the launch of what is now Foundation was February of last year. Yep.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we're going to turn it over to audience questions. So feel free to raise your hand. And while people are doing that, you said that you have a lot of kind of like creators in-house. Curious, like any fun stories or just like interesting people you want to highlight?
Great question.
You can revisit your music days.
I think Kit from our team has some really cool kind of abstract works that are very cool to check out. Her profile is Kitten Janae. Jeff from our team has some really interesting compositions. I don't even know what genre to call them, but they're beautiful. Yeah, so I guess those are 2 specific genres. Examples.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we have our first question from Rahul.
Hey, Paul. Hey, thanks for taking the time today. So my question is twofold. Onefold, what do you think about the issues that are being faced by other larger players in the NFT ecosystem, like OpenSea, counterfeit NFT, and the trust, and those sort of issues? And how do you think about solving this issue in-house, building the tech and the team for that, versus outsourcing it to a third party? Like I think Doppel is something you guys are using, but like on other similar solutions.
Yeah, so the question is mostly around trust and safety, I think. It's definitely a challenge. It's a challenge for us, much like it was a challenge for YouTube in the past. We don't have a silver bullet answer, but it's definitely like a top of mind priority. We do have a dedicated trust and safety person, and we're looking to grow that part of our company. We definitely are thinking about build and buy options, but in general, we do default to building things in a way that can help the whole ecosystem and not kind of like siloing our solution. So projects like that one you mentioned are definitely really interesting ones that we could like integrate with and kind of like help there be a decentralized data set of malicious players or addresses in the space. But it's a tough problem, and it's something, if great solutions for that, it's definitely something we're hiring for. I think there are some like creative things where like a neural net could help with solving, like identifying pieces of art that have already been like created elsewhere previously on the internet. But yeah, it's a tough one. Good question.
Thanks, Paul.
Oh, and the last bit is in order for collectors to feel safe, we do as much as we can to like provide the opportunities for the creators of the work to like give signals that they are indeed the creator who they're saying they are. And so the ability to link your Twitter and your Instagram is like an early stab in that direction, and we could keep thinking of ideas in that vein as well.
Awesome. Who do we have next? I don't want to mispronounce your name.
Okay, yeah, my name is Chukunantu. I'm joining from Lagos, Nigeria. So we are a huge fan of your products over here in Africa. A lot of creators have jumped on the Foundation platform. So my question is around community. How important is community to you? Basically, in building out Foundation. How important is community in driving out driving out the roadmap of the product and also the features and the releases of the product, and how involved are you? Because the time constraint because they're working, doing a lot of things? Like, how involved are you in like listening to the audience in the community and then getting feedback from them? Then my last question is about so product management in Web2 is kind of kind of different in Web3. So how did you tend to bridge that gap, and also how different like is it based on the Web2 and now Web3? Like what are the core differences from the Web2 to the Web3 sector? So those are my questions.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you for those. So I think your first question was around how kind of we listen to product ideas from the community, I think.
Yeah, community, yeah.
Yeah, so we definitely try to be as plugged in as possible with our community. We're always, Foundation is a different beast every 3 months or so. So the best way to stay engaged with our community is something we always want to keep iterating on. Twitter right now is a big part of that. We're always like watching for people tagging Foundation and like giving product ideas. In our early days, we had a Discord that we invested in a lot, but I think us having a single centralized Discord isn't really the answer too. We want to kind of empower everyone to spin up all kinds of Discords and have conversations about like sub aspects of Foundation. And so we want to find ways to be plugged into that, but I think that's a hard problem. And then we also have like a dedicated support staff where like sometimes product ideas will bubble through support as well if people are running into like things that are confusing. But it's definitely something we're always open to ideas on, and we like want to keep pushing on. I think on some time scale, we ought to think about like a public upvoting tool of some type. It's not something we've been able to create just yet. But so for now, Twitter is the short answer, but open to ideas. And then for the second part of your question with what's different about product in Web3, I think my solution was just kind of like jumping down the rabbit hole and immersing myself in Twitter and blogs and podcasts for a long time. So, I mean, even now, having been working in the space since 2017, I always feel like I'm learning new things. So it's even once you've been in Web3 for a while, I think we're all still beginners in a sense. But I think I would start with what's different about Web3 versus Web2, and then maybe think about what that means for product. It could be like even more confusing to like convolve them. But I think, one of those like ways we think about decision making that I mentioned is strong tech. And I think in order for that to have a meaning in Web3, it requires, having a sense of like what's new about Web3. And I think the strongest tool for picking up Web3 is probably through play. I think anyway, that's like the most fun way to learn and the easiest way to stay engaged when it is this like 24/7 learning environment that's always changing. So you can always play with dApps on a testnet, like Uniswap. It has like testnet environments that you can try with. You can use it on mainnet too, if you like. And then, I recommend just like kind of playing with like multi-sig wallets like Gnosis Safe. And hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. I have a question in the chat that I'll get to before we get to the live questions. So we have someone who asked, what tools are used to improve internal processes and drive efficiency? So like kind of how do you run your teams, run your businesses, and are those similar to those that are used in Web2 companies?
I think they're pretty similar. We rely heavily on Slack, Zoom, Loom, Notion, Figma, GitHub, and Linear. We do a lot of our product work in Linear, which is a newer app, but that I think is used pretty heavily in Web2 too, for like early stage startups anyway. So I wouldn't say the tools are dramatically different. Twitter also, again, I'll plug Twitter over and over again here. And I think because our team is remote first, we have to be really thoughtful about the handoffs when someone's going to sleep and when someone's waking up. And so we spend a lot of time with like crafting a good like update for the end of your day, whether that's in Slack or with a Loom video or in Notion. So some combination of all of those tools. I think as our team grows, we're getting more and more process oriented. I think in the early days, we let it be somewhat emergent kind of by design to like get as quickly as possible and in the most creative way to that 0 to 1 product market fit. But I think it's always something we want to be finding the simplest process that serves us. And for now, it's that set of tools.
Cool. George?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, sweet. So this is kind of like related to the question you just answered about like how is Web3 different from Web2. So like I'm in a pretty junior position myself, and what I find difficult is that in Web2 there are so many well distilled organized best practices and principles and even good series about what makes a product good and what makes its design, its technical execution, things like that, right? But I kind of feel like in Web3 there are just so many new things coming out all the time, and because people are so busy doing things, executing things, sometimes I just find it so hard for me to kind of keep up, learn, and more importantly, just making sure that I'm not staying on the surface. I'm actually going deep down into what's actually fundamentally different and what's the difference that matters. So I'm just really curious to hear how you kind of approach your personal learnings in Web3 and some kind of the things you would suggest.
Yeah, that's a great question and a hard one. I don't think I have a silver bullet answer there either, but I think it's something I honed over a year or so of kind of having a sense of where the signal is versus the noise. So I went to some meetups and talked with people about like Web3 and crypto. Listening to podcasts was really a big part of having kind of like a semi-trusted source that could like distill the signal from the noise for me. That was a big part of where I began. So when I was like washing dishes or walking my dog, I would listen to crypto podcasts. And yeah, again, playing with apps is a key way to find whether something is like uniquely delightful or has a meaningful value prop for you, which I think will be a decent proxy for whether there's like a meaningful value prop. And Twitter, again, I do curate exactly who I follow on Twitter, and that's been an ongoing process.
Yeah, I know people that are like obsessed with their Twitter follower ratio, and I was like, I think I follow like 4x more people than who follow me, just because like
I'm at the limit. I'm at 5,000. Twitter won't let me follow more. I wish I could.
We have some questions about recommended podcasts. I can share one or two of mine, but Paul would love to hear yours. For me, like who's kind of recently gone down the Web3 rabbit hole, like Bankless, I think is a great one. Chris Dixon and Naval kind of do the rounds of podcasts with a lot of different, like kind of Tim Ferriss, like, and I think just explain Web3 in a way that everyone can get excited about. And then there's Bankless has a spinoff called Overpriced JPEGs that kind of focuses on different NFT projects. Those are some for me as like someone newer into the space, but would love to hear yours, Paul.
Yeah, I think those are all great answers, and mine are a little bit dated because I lean less on podcasts now that I'm just even more immersed in it. But in the early days, Laura Shin's podcasts were really great, both Unchained and Unconfirmed. I'm not sure if those are both still around, but I think at least one of them is. And then if you really want to kind of nerd out on the more developer-y side, Epicenter is a really good one. They talk to all kinds of different projects in the Ethereum ecosystem and just like generally in blockchain. And one within the Ethereum ecosystem that's pretty interesting is like a weekly update on what's happening in the Ethereum ecosystem. That's called Into the Ether. The ETH Hub people do that one. I think that's an interesting one. Oh, and then Zero Knowledge. That one's amazing. They often talk just like about zero knowledge technology, but I think there are a lot of overlaps with blockchain. And so they end up talking to a lot of the top blockchain projects because like that's the technology that powers some scaling solutions and also powers some privacy preserving solutions on blockchains too. So Zero Knowledge is maybe my top recommendation, I think.
Awesome. Luke, we have a question. Do you have a question?
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, cool. I'm coming from the animation industry too. So I love Foundation being like for more individual artwork too. But my question is more on like, everything's happened so fast, as you mentioned, like the last 12 months, it sort of seems like maybe valuations are just massive. But like the companies have like decided to stay lean. Like you mentioned 25 people, and that seems to me like, wow, you probably could have, I mean, it's hard to hire, but you probably could have pushed that number way more. So is there kind of like a management idea of like, how can we really just grow the right people, or what are your thoughts on maybe like management discipline for that?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we definitely are lean right now. I think we are, we definitely want to preserve the talent density that we have. I think being thoughtful about hiring is a flywheel that will pay lots of dividends later. But we are trying to hire pretty quickly. Like we want to get to 50 and then 100 definitely within the next 12 months. Um, I think there's also some like characteristic time scale at play here. All the companies have like lots of profits and lots of investors now, but it wasn't so long ago that blockchain was still kind of like struggling for a place out there. So I think there's still some like growing pains from those early days. But for us, we're definitely a profitable business. We've like had a business model from day one, so very excited to be like growing pretty quickly from 25 to 50. But yeah, I guess talent density and being thoughtful is the short answer, but we do want to take on really like big internet scale problems, and we'll have to grow the team a lot to do that.
Love it.
Awesome. I just want to address two pings. One was someone who just pinged saying after the session, they're now going to go down the rabbit hole. So super exciting to see that impact. And it is like such an overused phrase, but there's really no better way to explain it than just like, you just like that initial jump that you take. And then someone asked who you follow on Twitter. So I will just plug your own Twitter at Paul Cowgill, first, last name. You can click on, the limit of 4,999 people that he follows and just kind of, take a look around that. Paul, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and giving some really helpful insights for people looking to transition the space and really exciting view of what's going to happen soon at Foundation. Anything you want to plug or any kind of last words?
Well, first off, thank you so much for hosting, and thanks for everyone for joining and for all the great questions. Follow me on Foundation too. I'm Paul on Foundation. I think, just stay tuned for lots of upcoming cool product launches we have on our Twitter. Dive in, try collecting an NFT on Foundation. I guess that's the main, that's a fun place to start. There's some great pieces out there.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks so much. Bye.